I'm Nick Westergaard, and this is On Brand, helping you tell your story. My guest this week is Brett Townsend.
So many things that we do in insights and analytics touch all parts of our business. And so if we don't understand the impact of the things that we're doing and how it's going to be implemented, then it's very hard for us to show our value or for people to see our value within the company because we're just basically doing research in their eyes.
Brett Townsend is the SVP of Strategy at Quester and has had a successful career of generating sizable revenue on both the corporate and agency sides of consumer insights. Brett has worked in domestic and global branding and innovation for major brands like Pepsi, Doritos, Ruffles, Walmart, Frigidaire, and Lowe's. He has led insights teams at PepsiCo, Electrolux, and Lowe's, and has worked across all major industries like FMCG, retail, food and beverage, durable goods, restaurants, and clothing. Along with Quester President Tim Hoskins, Brett is co-author of the new book, Insights on the Brink, Revitalizing the Market Research and Analytics Industry. My interview with Brett Townsend is coming right up. But first...
My dad works in B2B marketing, but I never really knew what that meant. Then one day my dad came by my school for career day and told everyone in my class he was a big ROAS man. Then he just kept saying things like, the bigger the ROAS, the better, over and over. My friends still laugh at me to this day. I think it means calculating a return on ad spend. One thing's for sure, I'll be known as the ROAS man's kid for the rest of my days. Why couldn't you just be a fireman or a lawyer? Why? You ruined my life, Dad.
Not everyone gets B2B, but LinkedIn has the people who do. And with ads on LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people based on job title, industry, likelihood to buy, and more. Start converting your B2B audience into high-quality leads today. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/MPN to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/MPN. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Carrie Barrett hosts a great podcast called The Carrie Barrett Show. Carrie, tell listeners what to expect from the big program.
We talk about everything from media training and virtual executive presence, tips and tricks, but also mindset, confidence, and how you can leverage those newfound skills.
Awesome. And where can people subscribe?
You can go to my website, www.carriebarrett.com. You can find the show at marketingpodcast.net, or you can search for The Carrie Barrett Show wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard her. Go subscribe.
Brett Townsend, welcome to On Brand.
Thank you, Nick.
So I have to start with your book because you and Tim have taken on a pretty big undertaking of revitalizing market research and analytics. So give us a quick level set. Where is market research and analytics as an industry, and where should it be?
Yeah, I think when you look at it, kind of the starting point of the book is that we as an industry are stuck in the past. That there's a lot of talk about the future of consumer insights when we really haven't resolved much of our past and evolved much past it. Usually we're not very good at showing our value. We're really great at data. We're really great at charts. We're really great at talking about what we do and how we do it, but we're not necessarily great storytellers all the time. And one of the things that we have historically been bad at is not tying insights to sales, to bottom line revenue and profit growth. And so, our industry, the perception of our industry has suffered because of that. And so I think that's where we start with this book, talk about how we got here, but then most importantly, talk about how we can improve and how we can evolve.
You talk about tying it to sales, to actual dollars. And I think, even though they are seemingly different areas in the process, as we talk about brand building and insights and analytics, that ability to tie things back to sales, to produce, to be able to speak to tangible results is something that is critical, and that we need to increasingly get our arms around in a more meaningful way. So how do we do that?
I mean, first of all, it's realizing that's our purpose. It's amazing when I go and speak at universities, or even when I've done internal trainings, I'll ask, what's the purpose of consumer insights? And not once has anybody answered to increase sales. But if you think about it, that's why we exist. That's why companies hire insights departments and give us budget, is because they hope that what we do will lead to more sales. They don't keep us around because we're interesting or that we come up with, nuggets of data every now and then. They keep us around because they hope that we're going to contribute to the bottom line. And we lose sight of that, I think, in the sea of methodology and data and reporting, and in our lack of business acumen as far as understanding the entire business in which we work. And so I think I kind of listed a number of things. I think, first of all, it just starts with a mindset, and you look at every single project that you do and you ask yourself, how does this lead to eventual sales? Sometimes it'll be a little harder to figure out than others, but that was the one thing I would always challenge my teams with, was when they came to me and like, here's a project I want to do, the first thing I would ask is, how is this going to eventually lead to sales? And it didn't take them very long to start with that when they came to talk to me about projects, but that's what we constantly have to have our eye focused on. That's the main thing. And then I think something I referenced now is we've got to really understand the business. We have to be better at business acumen. We're really good at understanding consumer insights and market research and methodologies and things. But do we understand marketing? Do we understand product development? Do we understand sales? Do we understand supply chain? Because so many things that we do in insights and analytics touch all parts of our business. And so if we don't understand the impact or the implication of the things that we're doing and how it's going to be implemented, then it's very hard for us to show our value, or for people to see our value within the company, because we're just basically doing research in their eyes.
You are not giving us easy things to check off of a list, because when we talk about business acumen, that's so critical. And yet, just because of the shifts in media, different dynamics, different backgrounds, that's not always a given thing, that whether it's agency professionals or those working brand side are going to have that background. So how can we sharpen our saw when it comes to better understanding some of those pretty big challenges?
Yeah, when you asked that question, what just came to mind was my accounting professor when I was getting my MBA, and there were two different accounting classes. And at the beginning of the first class, he said, "I am not here to turn you into accountants. I am just here to make you not look stupid when you're looking at a P&L or at an income statement." And so he ended up being one of the best teachers I'd ever had, because that was his goal. He wasn't trying to make us all CPAs. He was just trying to give us the understanding of business from an accounting perspective. And I think that's what we need to do. We don't have to become supply chain experts or experts in these other fields, but we need to learn enough to be able to understand and speak that language back to them, but we don't have to be as good as them. So for instance, when I was at PepsiCo, I spent, it takes effort, I think, is really the main answer to your question. It takes us stepping outside of what our job description says we do and take the time to learn the other parts of the business on our own. And so, I would take the time and I would spend some time with people in product development. PepsiCo is actually really good about getting people to understand the basic parts of the sales business. And so I went on a route ride with a direct store delivery driver, because PepsiCo delivers everything direct to the store. And so I got to see that part of the business. I spent time on a sales team. I worked with marketing teams. And so it's not something that just happens overnight, but something that you have to invest the time in and take different roles or take the time to shadow other people, ask questions. And so it's just something that is really on us because a lot of companies don't have programs that help you learn the entire business. And so really, if we're to be effective and be proactive in what we do, then it's on us to be able to do that. Because if not, then we don't understand the business. We just sit back and let the other business experts come to us and basically place orders for market research. And then we're just doing the work, but we don't have any idea what we're doing or how it fits in the whole landscape of things. Whereas if we understand the business and we know what's going on, then we can actually be proactive and say, hey, because of this, here is what I'm recommending we do. Or because of these market trends within product development, here is what I recommend that we do for research. And so then we become much more active partners and more of a source of competitive advantage for our companies.
That is such an important way of thinking of that, of not ending up as, like you said, kind of order takers in there for orders of research. And when you talk about that work, the outcomes can be very different as well, whether it is brand extension, new product improvement, marketing campaigns. How does the work on your end look different based on those different outcomes?
So like I said, we're the ones dictating the strategy rather than the other way around. And it always is, you're in a tough spot when the only voices that you hear from your coworkers are when they're coming to you to ask you to do certain types of research, because at that point they're dictating the research. They're a lot of times dictating the methodology. They're the ones in control. And so I think that's where the important thing is that it puts insights in the driver's seat. It helps us be the ones in control because, one of the things that I would tell people, especially when I was leading the insights function at Electrolux, is that there is no other team within the entire company that has its tentacles throughout every part of the organization like we do. Sales doesn't always work with product development. Accounting doesn't even always work with marketing, all these different things, but yet our consumer insights team worked with everyone. And so it was incumbent on us to understand corporate strategy, to understand what the company goals were, to understand what sales is doing, what product development is doing, what marketing is doing, because at the heart of everything is the consumer. And so if we are the ones that are being that proactive voice of empathy for the consumer, if we're the ones that are telling product line, hey, I see that you want to do this, but it doesn't really fit with the company goals. So how about I suggest we do this instead? Or when someone comes to us to dictate methodology, we say, well, why don't you tell me about what problems you're trying to solve first, and then we'll worry about how we go about doing that later. And then at the very end, when we are telling this consumer story, we are taking all of these different things into account. We're taking into account how the product gets made, how it's going to get sold, how it's going to be messaged and marketed to people. And so we have to come up with a product that meets their needs and is a solution. We have to sell it through the right language and then message it through the consumer's own language, where it really hits home in an emotional way to them that spurs action, that really drives someone to make a decision to do that. And so it's very much this, I call it the insights ecosystem, where we really need to understand all aspects of the company in order to do our job.
On Brand, we'll be right back after this.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Carrie Barrett hosts a great podcast called The Carrie Barrett Show. Carrie, tell listeners what to expect from the big program.
We talk about everything from media training and virtual executive presence, tips and tricks, but also mindset, confidence, and how you can leverage those newfound skills.
Awesome. And where can people subscribe?
You can go to my website, www.carriebarrett.com. You can find the show at marketingpodcast.net, or you can search for The Carrie Barrett Show wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard her. Go subscribe. You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Christy Heiler hosts a fantastic podcast called Own It. Christy, tell us more about the show.
Own It is all about celebrating women and non-binary advertising agency owners. We talk about buying out of the Boys Club of Advertising because less than 1% of ad agencies are owned by women.
And where can people subscribe?
You can find the podcast at untilyouownit.com. We're also on the Marketing Podcast Network at marketingpodcast.net. And of course, you can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard her. Go subscribe.
Now, back to the show. So you've talked us through the challenge of insights and market research today. As we look at addressing this, walk us through the overall structure of the book. What are readers going to find as they look to address this problem with your new book, Insights on the Brink?
So I think it starts with identifying the problem. There are some people that we talk to who work in really great organizations that don't have these issues, and they're not even aware that there is a problem. And so I think it's really identifying, what the problem is. The problem is, the fact that like I mentioned, that we don't tie everything to sales, that, we've become the greatest threat to our own existence because everybody should love us and want to protect us. That consumer insights are needed when the economy is good and when the economy is bad. But it seems like when the economy is bad, the first thing that gets cut is consumer insights. And so it's really just helping them understand a few of the actual problems that there are. But then it's really a book of hope. And it really is about providing solutions. And the one goal that Tim and I had as we were putting this book together is we didn't want it to be philosophical. We didn't want it to be up in the clouds. We wanted anyone at any level to be able to read this book and come away with at least a couple of things that they could start to implement right away in order to help them do their job effectively. And so we start identifying a number of different things. As I mentioned, we talk about the problem, then we talk about how do we better tell our stories? How do we we have a whole chapter on how do we better tie things to sales? How do we understand human emotion? How do we build our teams? Because I think a lot of the ways that we go about finding talent is not conducive to producing the types of results that are expected of us. We get into narratives. This is the hidden driver behind a lot of decisions that we make as people, is that you can measure what someone's doing at any point in time, but what are the narratives that are driving them to make those decisions? And that's something that we don't usually capture in consumer insights. And then it's really about how do we move forward from here? What are practical ways to improve our processes? And then we have a whole chapter that's just dedicated to senior leadership about the partnership and about how that partnership can improve from both ends of the spectrum. And so I think it's a really nice progression of starting with the problem, hitting on some of the key elements and key hot points of consumer insights, and then wrapping it up with a truly actionable direction as to here's what we need to do to evolve.
I love that. A book that provides the way and positions you for success in doing something differently, doing something better at the end.
And I think, too, the other thing is that a lot of the books, when we were first starting to write this, what we realized is that a lot of the books that are written for the consumer insights industry are not about the industry itself. They're about methodologies or techniques or philosophies or things. And that's not at all to discount those books. I mean, we've read a lot of them. There's some really great, brilliant authors and practitioners out there that have written some great books that can be applied. But there's been very little discussion around the industry itself. And so that is another thing that we really wanted to focus on, is that there's all these other techniques and philosophies and things out there, and go and read those books because they're great. We just want to talk about the industry as a whole, regardless of the methodologies or the philosophies or the ways that we do things, and really just talk about how we can improve the industry.
That's such a great point, too. And because, again, as I'm sure people are looking for help, there's lots of different books, and understanding why this one is different, too, is key. I'm sure there are lots of examples, case studies in the book, but I wonder if, as we talk about this, if there's a favorite insight success story that you really enjoy sharing, whether you're speaking at a conference, writing in the book, or chatting on a podcast.
Wow, where do I start? I mean, and so much of the book is based on mine and Tim's experiences in the industry. We've both been in this for over 25 years, and so we've got a lot to gain on. But there's like really grand, big examples, but my favorites are the simple ones where it was either myself or Tim or somebody on our teams just thinking about, how can we just do one thing differently? How can we do one thing better? So one example from the book that I'll mention is that when I was at PepsiCo and was doing some work on beverages, I was looking back at some of the other research that had been done and was looking at how we were screening consumers into our research, because the research had been the data had been really flat. We weren't really showing much of anything. It wasn't really giving us a lot of direction on what to go do. And I realized that we were screening the way that most categories screen. We were just bringing in category users. We'd screen them about, do you drink soft drinks? What brands are you aware of? How often do you drink soft drinks? And then based on those basic questions, they would get screened into the research. And so then I realized we're getting a lot of Coke drinkers in our surveys who don't care about Pepsi. They don't care about our success. They are invested in Coke and not Pepsi. And so just making a simple change to only screening in Pepsi users, and in some cases only screening in Pepsi lovers, like people that are very enthusiastic about the brand. We saw dramatic differences in our data, because now we were talking to people who care about us, who want us to succeed, who love our products, and are invested in seeing us evolve and grow and improve. And so it gave us far better direction as to where to go than other research than we were doing. And so it's just those simple things about just asking, why are we doing it this way? And is there a better way that we could do it? I think those are some of the funnest stories, because it's simple and it just shows that curiosity that I think every insights professional should have.
Well, and that's a great mindset shift too, is, sometimes we think of the great big grand challenges, but these simple process improvements that insights can guide ultimately add up in the overall brand experience that we're building. And if we can just get, that much closer incrementally in connecting some of those dots, we can do some pretty amazing things.
Yeah, we absolutely can. And it's that simple. Like I said, I mean, I feel like the two most important qualities that any insights professional must have is curiosity and empathy. And I think just those two things alone can fix a lot of some of the issues that we have as an industry.
Wow, I love that. And it bears repeating: curiosity and empathy. So important in thinking about a better path forward when it comes to insights and analytics. Well, so many of our points of conversation, from the mindset shifts to the little things that we were just talking about, make me smile. And it is now my opportunity, Brett, to ask you for a brand that has made you smile recently.
There's a lot, because, for every bad example, there's a good example of marketing. But I would have to say Modelo, the beer brand Modelo Especial. And this is very ironic because I don't drink alcohol, but yet that brand has really made me smile because I love their storytelling and their consistent message that they're putting out about, being a fighter, and they're celebrating their consumer and really highlighting them and making it so unique. And they are telling a story right now that none of their competitors can duplicate. And when you look at the beer market, it's pretty saturated. Light beer is light beer, beer is beer. How do you distinguish yourself? Because you can by taste, but that's easily duplicated. You can distinguish by price. That's very easily duplicated. You distinguish yourself through a true timeless brand story that no one else can tell. And that's what Modelo is doing, so much so that they are now the number one beer in the U.S., overtaking Bud Light, which could be a whole other podcast about what's going on over there. But that has been a brand recently over the last, I would say, 6 months to a year that has really made me smile, and it's because of their storytelling.
And I would add to that, just because I am a movie soundtrack nerd, but their use of the Ennio Morricone, I believe it's The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. It's one of the scores there, but it's sort of, you talk about the story of being a fighter, and I feel like borrowing elements from what's ultimately a kind of a classic story. Like I was sitting there listening to it so much, I'm like, what is this from? And that's why I knew it, but it kind of channels and borrows elements from other stories from eras past. So, and
I love the way that they have, they started with, really going at their Hispanic core audience and highlighting Hispanic consumers and Hispanic fighters and how they've risen up. But if you've noticed, they've started to expand that story now, and they're now celebrating all of the different types of consumers they have. So they are still true to who they are about being from their Hispanic heritage, but yet expanding and allowing other people to come in, because a lot of people are really being attracted to the brand.
Well, now I'm thirsty. So beyond sending our listeners to the grocer's cooler for an ice cold Modelo Especial, where can folks go to learn more about who you are and what you do?
So the easiest thing would be Quester.com is our website, and there you can find a banner at the top that will link you to the book. If you'd like to purchase the book, we've made it easy. It'll take you right to the Amazon link there. Also have a lot on there about the types of work we do, because that is one of the things that I love about after leaving my corporate career and coming over to work at Quester is that, we as an agency really live the principles that we talk about in the book. And we really focus on what we feel are the right things and we feel like we're doing our part to help evolve the way that people feel and look at insights through not only the way we talk about it, but through the way we do our work and through the way that we present our work. And so I think that's probably the best way to go. And under the book banner, you'll find some information about me and Tim if you're interested. But I would probably say that's the best place to go. And you can always find me on LinkedIn as well.
Awesome. Well, we will link up to all of that in our show notes, which folks can always find at onbrandpodcast.com. Brett Townsend, thanks for being on brand with us.
Thank you for having me, Nick.
On Brand is part of the Marketing Podcast Network. If you like what you're hearing, if we've made you smile, you can always listen free on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or whatever your favorite platform may be. And please take a moment and rate and review the podcast to help others find the show. Until next week, I'm Nick Westergaard, and I'll see you on the internet.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Carrie Barrett hosts a great podcast called The Carrie Barrett Show. Carrie, tell listeners what to expect from the big program.
We talk about everything from media training and virtual executive presence, tips and tricks, but also mindset, confidence, and how you can leverage those newfound skills.
Awesome. And where can people subscribe?
You can go to my website, www.carriebarrett.com. You can find the show at marketingpodcast.net, or you can search for The Carrie Barrett Show wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard her. Go subscribe. This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.